जय राधा माधवा कुंज बिहारी जय गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी जय जय गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी जय यशोदानंदन ब्रज जन रंजना यशोदानंदन ब्रज जन रंजना जमुना तीरा वनचारी जमुना तीरा वनचारी जय राधा माधवा कुंज बिहारी जय जय राधा माधवा कुंज बिहारी जय गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी जय गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी यशोदानंदन ब्रज जन रंजना यशोदानंदन ब्रज जन रंजना जमुना तीरा वनचारी तीरा जमुना तीरा वनचारी जय राधा माधवा कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधवा कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधवा कुंज बिहारी Radha Madhava ki His great, His divine grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Shri Prabhupada ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Nitai Gopinande.
Okay, Hare Krishna, everybody. Let's begin with invocation. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Sapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha. Shri Radha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Lalitam Sadvaitam Sadvadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radha Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sude Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrindam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Yes, devotees. So today we're going to be reading from Krishna book, and we are doing the last chapter, which is summary of the description of Lord Lord Krishna's pastimes. So if we have to look at Krishna book and we take how it is, it's essentially the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, speaking about Krishna's from the time of his birth, all the way in his activities in childhood, and later on, right up until his activities in Dwarika, with the queens of Dwarika. So where we are today and where we ended off last week is we'll be reading more about the activities of the queens of Dwarika. It's quite special because the queens of Dwarika are given a special benediction because of their love and compassion that they have for Krishna. And we see from their example what we need to follow. So let's read a little more and then we'll see some very nice realizations we get from this. So where we ended off, we'll begin. If you have the book, you can open up. It's in this version, which is page 927. So all the wives of Lord Krishna were completely absorbed in thought of him. Krishna is known as Yogeshvara, the master of all yogis, and all the wives of Krishna at Dwarika used to keep this Yogeshvar within their hearts. Instead of trying to be master of all yogic mystic powers, it is better if one simply keeps the supreme Yogeshwar Krishna within his heart. Thus one's life can become perfect, and one can very easily be transferred to the kingdom of God. It is understood that all the queens of Krishna who lived with him at Dwarika were in their previous lives very exalted devotees who wanted to establish a relationship with Krishna in conjugal love. Thus, they were given the chance to become his wives and enjoy a constant loving relationship with him. Ultimately, they were all transferred to the Vaikuntha planets. Srila Prabhupada explains that the demons and the gopis were both afforded liberation. The difference between the demons and the gopis is that the demons came as enemies of Krishna, whereas the gopis came as servants and lovers to Krishna. But ultimately, both of them attained the same liberation. Srila Prabhupada also explains that if one has to become the enemy of Krishna, rather be the enemy. Because even the demons who were strong enemies of the Lord ultimately got liberation. Of course, we can't compare ourselves to the demons because they were previous advanced devotees in their previous lives who either created some offense and thereby took birth as demons. But the realization and understanding is there that even in the demons, their minds were fixed on the Lord. Granted, it was they had different thoughts. They wanted to kill Krishna, But at the same time, their minds were absorbed and fixed on the Lord. So that's what we need to take away from that. By fixating our minds on the Lord, and in doing so, constantly meditating on Him, that's the perfection of our lives. What is it? At the end of this life, our goal is to be able to remember Krishna at the time of death. Now, if you have to think about anything that you want to become expert in, you have to be able to train the mind. Right? The mind is chanchala. It's never fixed. It's fleeting. I mean, as I'm speaking to you now, there must have been 100 thoughts that went through your mind. Right? So it's very difficult to be able to control the mind. And one who has been able to master the senses and control the mind is considered a pure, perfected yogi. Okay? So it's very difficult for us to be able to do that. But some of the ways we can be able to train the mind is through devotional service. Srila Prabhupada has given us this principle and this process that makes it so easy. I mean, all Srila Prabhupada said is just chant the Maha Mantra. Just chant the Maha Mantra and perform and engage in devotional service. It's that simple, right? It's so easy to perform devotional service. There's so many different forms of devotional service that the Lord has given us. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Dasanavedanam, 9 forms of devotional service. So each one of them is there to attract us based on our propensity of how we want to serve. So Srila Prabhupada has given us this perfect process. He has given us these different ways in which we can serve the Lord. But still, many of us find it difficult to be able to take up this process. Or there's reluctance on our part. And you have to ask ourselves, why? Is it that we are too egotistical, that we feel, okay, devotional service is not for us, it's for the others? Or it's for the people that are meek and humble? What is it? Okay? So we just need to introspect a little bit on that and just see how we can become a little bit and follow in the footsteps of the queens of Dwarika. The supreme absolute truth, personality of Godhead, is never impersonal. All the Vedic scriptures glorify the transcendental performance of his various personal activities and pastimes. It is said that in the Vedas and in the Ramayana, only the activities of the Lord are described. Everywhere in Vedic literature, his glories are sung. As soon as soft-hearted people, such as women, hear those transcendental pastimes of Lord Krishna, they immediately become attracted to him. Soft-hearted women and girls are therefore very easily drawn to the Krishna consciousness movement. One who is thus drawn to the Krishna consciousness movement and tries to keep himself in constant touch with such consciousness certainly gets the supreme salvation, going back to Krishna in Goloka Vrindavan. If simply by developing Krishna consciousness one can be transferred to the spiritual world, one can simply imagine how blissful and blessed were the queens of Lord Krishna, who talked with him personally and saw Lord Krishna face to face. No one can properly describe the fortune of the wives of Lord Krishna. They took care of him personally by rendering various transcendental services, like bathing him, feeding him, pleasing him, and serving him. Thus, no one's austerities can compare to the queens at Dwarika. Now, how many of us, like if we look at, say for example, the Rasa dance, we see that the demigods were actually clamoring around the outside of the Rasa dance, standing and observing and hankering to be able to be a part of that personal association of the Lord. So if the demigods are sitting and waiting for a personal association of the Lord, and then we see the queens of Dwarika, the gopis, personally engaging in that service of the Lord, one can understand the exalted nature of the gopis and the queens of Vrindavan. That these demigods who are controlling different functions of the universe by just mere simple gopis or the Vaishnavas, right? That's what they were. They essentially were Vaishnavas, worshipping Krishna. That's what they were doing. But just by their simplicity, they will be able to attain something that's so unattainable, even for exalted personalities. And here Srila Prabhupada is explaining the difference. Why? So he says here that all the queens of Dwarka, the reason they were immediately attracted to Krishna, and women become attracted to Krishna, because they are soft-hearted in nature. So why is this soft-hearted, compassionate quality so important in devotional service or in remembering the Lord? Because when there is no compassion and soft-hearted nature, one is often envious or proud. Right? There's the reluctance to bow down. And when I say bow down, it's not offering your Dandavat pranams. Right? It's true surrender unto the Lord. And generally, women have this nature that they are going to be completely compassionate, forgiving. I mean, to become a mother is the ultimate sacrifice. I always joke, and I say this at home, that the Grihastha ashram and being a mother is the ultimate test of tolerance. Right? You have to become patient. You have nagging children that demand your attention. You have work responsibilities in this day and age. We have our services that we have to do as a husband, as a mother. We still do our devotional services at home, whether you're a pujari, whatever it is. You have all these services that you are juggling as a female. Right? But at the same time, if your child comes to you, I'm hungry, in the midst of everything, you drop it and you will serve your child. In the same way, the queens of Dwarka, the gopis, all they were interested in is pleasing Krishna. Right? I mean, we know that it's described that when the chariot of Krishna had come into the Dwarka, the queens of Dwarka had left everything. The gopis, when Krishna used to come out, they used to just abandon everything. Whether they were fully dressed, whether they had something on the stove, whatever it is, everything was dropped because they ran to be able to have Krishna's association, have his darshan, to be able to see him, get a glance of him. And all of this is just because in their minds, all they thought of, how can we serve Kanaya? How can we serve Krishna? Krishna wants something to eat. Let me figure out how I'm going to source the ingredients to be able to serve him. Right? Srimati Radharani has never cooked the same preparation twice for the Lord. Her mind is just so expert that she can take any vegetable or any boga and she can prepare these various preparations for Krishna, all because of her love for him. Krishna would be pleased just by having her cook for him because of her pure love that she has for him. But yet she is thinking, how can I be able to serve my Lord so that he's not going to be able to have the same preparation twice? How many of us actually do that in our own homes? Many of the times we repeat the same preparations. We're not even able to think about the different preps that we're able to do. Our span is limited. But this is the nature of the gopis in Vrindavan. Srila Prabhupada also explains that the gopis were not born in Brahmana or Kshatriya families, and that's the difference. But they were born in Vaishya families, right? Vaishya families that are not big mercantile communities, but they were cowherd communities. They are not well educated, although they heard all sorts of knowledge from Brahmanas. Srila Prabhupada writes that the exemplary character of devotional service manifested by the devotees of Vrindavan is the purest type of devotion. The gopis particularly showed pure devotional service toward Krishna, so much so that Krishna himself remained indebted to them. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is indebted to someone. Isn't that profound? Lord Chaitanya thus said that the devotional service manifested by the gopis in Vrindavan excelled all other methods of approaching the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Exhibiting the topmost example of Krishna Prema, the gopis displayed their love, youth, and beauty only for increasing Krishna's joy. Their selfless service attitude and dedication towards Krishna is worshipped even by exalted devotees such as Uddhava. There's a nice pastime by Giriraj Swami where he explains in 1971, you all are familiar of Mr. Nair and what a cheater he was, right? He basically sold the ISKCON Juhu land to more than one person, right? There were two people prior to when Giriraj Maharaj and the devotees approached him to purchase the land. So when Giriraj Swami had purchased the land, Mr. Nair was giving them the runaround. Mr. Nair, they used to often go to Mr. Nair's home and they used to visit him, and sometimes he used to give them prasadam. But each time Giriraj Maharaj used to say that we couldn't differentiate if he was our friend or our enemy because he was so duplicitous, right? And eventually Srila Prabhupada had to get involved because he was giving them a runaround for a long time. And Srila Prabhupada told Giriraj Maharaj that you are simple. And Giriraj Maharaj listened to this and he thought, he looked at being addressed as simple and he thought, you know, my mind is so simple, like what am I thinking? Like, you know, what is wrong with me? He was like, he had self-depreciating thoughts about Srila Prabhupada addressing him as being simple. And then other times, Srila Prabhupada, when he was explaining in a morning walk actually with Tamal Krishna Maharaj, they were talking about the salvation of Srinivata, right? And where Krishna had defeated the whirlwind demon, right? There, it is said that after observing such wonderful happenings, right, Nanda Maharaj began to think of the words of Vasudeva again and again. And previously, we had read how Nanda Maharaj considered Vasudeva a great sage and a mystic yogi because Vasudeva had foretold an incident that happened in Vrindavan where Krishna was living. And Prabhupada had remarked, Vasudeva is a Kshatriya, a ruler. With political eyesight, Vasudeva predicted this may happen. But Nanda Maharaj, as a Vaishya, a simple agriculturist, thought, O Vasudeva is a foreseer. And here Giriraj Maharaj is explaining that he was addressed as simple by Srila Prabhupada, but here Srila Prabhupada is addressing Nanda Maharaj as simple. And he's addressing it in a form of admiration and adoration. And in the same way, Srila Prabhupada goes on to explain, for him, referring to Nanda Maharaj, it is all right. He is a Vaishya, so he should believe like that. And a politician should act like Vasudeva. One should not imitate. So basically, based on our ashram, our thought processes are in keeping with that. Some of us may not be engaged in a Kshatriya profession, but we end up having our thoughts and processes are like a Kshatriya. Right? But Prabhupada explains that the best way is to be simple-minded like the Vaishyas, like the cowherd girls and the gopis in Vrindavan. That's the best way with that simple mentality of the cowherd men and the cowherd boys. In this way, one can approach him and get his mercy. Shukadeva Goswami informed Maharaj Parikshit that for self-realization, the austerities and penances performed by the queens at Dwarka have no comparison. Shri Shri Radharanath ki jai, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki jai, Ki Govardhana ki jai. The objective of self-realization is one, Krishna. Therefore, although the dealings of the queens with Krishna appear just like ordinary dealings between husband and wife, the principal point to be observed is the queen's attachment to Krishna. Therefore, although the dealings of the queens with Krishna appear just like ordinary dealings. The entire process of austerity and penance is meant to detach one from the material world and enhance one's attachment to Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Krishna is the shelter of all persons advancing in self-realization. As an ideal householder, he lived with his wives and performed the Vedic rituals just to show less intelligent persons that the Supreme Lord is never impersonal. Krishna lived with his wives and performed and children in all opulence, exactly like an ordinary conditioned soul, just to teach those souls who are actually conditioned that they must enter into the family circle of Krishna, where he is the center. For example, the members of the Yadu dynasty lived in a family of Krishna, and Krishna was the center of all their activities. Renunciation is not as important as enhancing one's attachment to Krishna. The Krishna consciousness movement is meant especially for this purpose. We are preaching the principle that it does not matter whether a man is a sannyasi or a grihasta. One simply has to increase his attachment for Krishna, and then his life is successful. Following in the footsteps of Lord Krishna, one can live with his family members or within the society or nation, not for the purpose of indulging in sense gratification, but to realize Krishna by advancing in attachment for him. There are 4 principles of elevation from the conditioned life to the life of liberation, which are technically known as Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha: religion, economic development, sense gratification, and liberation. If one lives a family life following in the footsteps of Lord Krishna's family members, one can achieve all 4 of these principles of success simultaneously by making Krishna the center of one's lives, or all activities. So, many times there's this misconception that if one is a householder or a grihasta, that one cannot attain liberation. Now, Krishna, if you think about him, he started off as a little cowherd boy running in the dust of Vrindavan. Then he went on to speak the Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. Right? We can see the different types of ashrams that Krishna had taken himself through to be able to teach by his example what we need to be able to do in these ashrams. Krishna is beyond the Vedic Varnashram system. Right? He's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. I mean, if we think about it, the Lord came down just to be merciful to us, to display his pastimes. Right? He came with his associates, but all of that was to be able to teach us that how we should serve him, how we should interact with others, and how we should follow his example. Then he came down as Lord Chaitanya, and he showed us how to be the ultimate devotee of the Lord. Right? And we have these examples where the Lord is personally expressing how we should be able to serve him. And it is said that for the normal human being and the materialist, it's very difficult to understand Krishna. And why is it so difficult to understand Krishna? In Srimad Bhagavatam 6:9-34-36, it is said that Krishna is asarira, right? He has no material body. Right? For the materialists, if you have to tell them that, they're not going to be able to understand Krishna. He is as-saranaya. He is not dependent on anyone. He is ana-vekshita. He does not wait for our cooperation. He is avikramayanamena. He creates, maintains, and then destroys the universe without transformation of his swarupa. And he is aguna. He is transcendental to all material qualities, yet he appears to be engaged in material creation, maintenance, and destruction. I mean, if you're preaching and you have to tell people that we have Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but he has 16,108 wives, what are people going to say? No, he's just promiscuous and, he's just frivolous in his activities. But Krishna, for each one of his wives that he had taken, each one had their own palace. They were cared for individually, and he was present with each one of them simultaneously. Which human would be able to do that? Okay? But if you have to explain all of this to materialists, it's very difficult to be able to grasp Krishna's qualities. And this is why the principle and the situation of the gopis and the queens of Dwarika is so special, because not only did they understand Krishna's supremacy, due to the influence of Yogamaya, they didn't see him as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because Krishna wanted to just enjoy his normal relationship with them. Right? He didn't want them to know him as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but he wanted to be able to enjoy the rasas that he had playing out with them. Whereas us in the material world, by our material conception, it is improper for us to try and assume that we are equivocal or on the same basis of the gopis, that we forget Krishna's role and position as the Supreme Lord and Master. As I said, there's different ways in which you can approach the Lord, right? A parent, the Lord and Master, his lover, his friend, these 5 different relationships that you can have with the Lord. But it is advised that we should caution against relating to Krishna in a very, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a very colloquial, friendly manner. We should always remember at the end of the day that the Lord is our Lord and Master. Okay? When we become too friendly and familiar with the Lord, then we lose that. We run the risk of losing the awe and reverence. Okay? So we have to be very careful about that, because it's very easy for Maya to set in and for us to start thinking that, okay, we are now Krishna's friend. It's a very dangerous position to be in. Srila Prabhupada, he's the most exalted Vaishnav. We can't even think or dream of getting to or having Srila Prabhupada's realizations. None of us can compare. But Srila Prabhupada regularly prayed deeply and sincerely to the Lord to not have himself be caught up in Maya. He kept on praying, please do not let me be caught up in Maya. Right? And Srila Prabhupada exhibited by his own actions that one has to be able to serve. At his age, when he boarded the Jaladuta and he went to the West, all he was thinking was that he had to save and take this message, following the instruction of his spiritual master. He had to go and he had to preach the message of Bhagavatam. He had a few cantos in his bookcase, and then he boarded the Jaladuta and went across. But even with that, and engaging with the hippies, I don't know about you, but if I'm in an environment where somebody is smoking, just that smoke seems to agitate me, and I don't like this. But Srila Prabhupada was dealing with people not just smoking cigarettes or tobacco, but smoking weed and ganja and all these other things. But yet Srila Prabhupada remained tolerant and compassionate, because his aim was to be able, he knew that these fallen souls were suffering. And he wanted to, that's the nature of a devotee. A devotee is compassionate. A devotee cannot stand to see the suffering of another human being. How many of us can say that we are so moved by the suffering of other living entities that we are going to do a little bit of what Srila Prabhupada did and go to preach the holy name? How many of us do this on a regular basis? How many of us have even done this once? But Srila Prabhupada just had this compassion that he wanted to deliver the fallen souls, and that is why he went to the West. It is already known to us that Krishna had 16,108 wives. All these wives were exalted, liberated souls, and among them, Queen Rukmini was the chief. After Rukmini, there were 7 other principal wives, and the names of the sons of these 8 principal queens have already been mentioned. Besides the sons born of these 8 queens, Lord Krishna had 10 sons by each of the other queens. Thus, altogether, Krishna's sons numbered 16,108 times 10. One should not be astonished to hear that Krishna had so many sons. One should always remember that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead and that he has unlimited potencies. He claims all living entities as his sons, so the fact that he had 161,080 sons attached to him personally should be no cause for astonishment. Among Krishna's greatly powerful sons, 18 sons were Maharathas. The Maharathas could fight alone against many thousands of foot soldiers, charioteers, cavalry, and elephants. The reputations of these 18 sons are very widespread and are described in almost all the Vedic scriptures. The 18 Maharatha sons are listed as Pradyumna, Aniruddha, Diptiman, Banu, Samba, Madhu, Bridhabhanu, Chitrabhanu, Rika, Aruna, Pushkara, Vedabahu, Shrutadeva, Sunandana, Chitrabahu, Virupa, Kavi, and Niyagrodha. Of these 18 Maharatha sons of Krishna, Pradyumna is considered the foremost. Pradyumna happened to be the eldest son of Queen Rukmini, and he inherited all the qualities of his great father, Lord Krishna. He married the daughter of his maternal uncle Rukmi, and from that marriage, Aniruddha was born. Aniruddha was so powerful that he could fight against 10,000 elephants. He married the granddaughter of Rukmi, the brother of his grandmother Rukmini. Because the relationship between these cousins was distant, such a marriage was not uncommon. Aniruddha's son was Vajra. When the whole Yadu dynasty was destroyed by the curse of some Brahmanas, only Vajra survived. Vajra had one son, whose name was Pratibahu. The son of Pratibahu was named Subahu. The son of Subahu was named Sanatasena, and the son of Sanatasena was Satasena. It is stated by Shukadev Goswami that all the members of the Yadu dynasty had many children. Just as Krishna had many sons, grandsons, and great-grandsons, each one of the kings named herewith also had similar family extensions. Not only did all of them have many children, but all were extraordinarily rich and opulent. None of them were weak or short-lived, and above all the members of the Yadu dynasty were staunch devotees of the Brahmanical culture. It is the duty of the Kshatriya kings to maintain the Brahmanical culture and protect the qualified Brahmanas, and all these kings discharged their duties rightly. The members of the Yadu dynasty were so numerous that it would be very difficult to describe them all, even if one had a duration of life of many thousands of years. Shri Sukadev Goswami informed Maharaj Parikshit that he had heard from reliable sources that simply to teach the children of the Yadu dynasty, there were as many as 38,800,000 tutors. Right? Just to be able to teach Krishna's sons, there were more than 38 million teachers. If so many teachers were needed to educate their children, one can simply imagine how vast was the number of family members. As for their military strength, it is said that King Ugrasen alone had 10 quadrillion soldiers as personal bodyguards. And this is just Krishna's. All this came from Krishna's sons and Krishna's grandchildren. Such is the magnanimity of the Lord. Before the advent of Lord Krishna within this universe, there were many battles between the demons and the demigods. Many demons died in the fighting, and they were all given the chance to take birth in high royal families on this earth. Because of their royal exalted posts, all these demons became very much puffed up, and their only business was to harass their subjects. You know, there's one true way in which we can destroy our Bhakti Lata Bij and destroy whatever positive bank balance we have is that when we develop pride. Pride is the sure way to be able to fall down. King Chitraketu, he was a very exalted devotee from his past life and his activities. But he, while flying around, looked down and saw Lord Shiva embracing Parvati. And in his mind, he had this thought, like, it was a fleeting thought, but it was like, this is not befitting behavior of you, Lord Shiva, who's supposed to be the ultimate renunciate. It was a fleeting thought. He didn't even utter it, it was a thought. And just based on that, he ended up falling down. And then he was cursed, and he had to take birth again, and only then was he able to get liberation. But it was a fleeting thought of pride. And if we think about it, you know, there was this instance where during my work practices, we know that in the medical profession, there's lots of bullying, right? And in one such instance, I was the victim of this. And I had this very difficult consultant who basically was putting a lot of pressure on me to the extent where it was making my working environment difficult. And I was having a conversation with another colleague and saying how difficult it was. And then they told me, but this doctor, who is like the king in this kraal, or this unit, if you take him out of this and you put him in another unit, or if you take him out of this and you put him in any other place, he would amount to nothing. And it's true. So just like that, we are just parts and parcel. We are just infinite spirit souls. Whatever position that we may think that we have, and I say think that we have because it's all fleeting, it's all temporary, right? This Brahman thread that you may wear, the hat that you have, that you are an excellent preacher or an excellent singer, Krishna can take all of that away in an instant, like within a flash. All of these things that we attach a status and a symbol to can just evaporate within seconds if Krishna wills it. Whatever material opulence we have, whatever fame and good fortune we have, is all due to the mercy of Krishna. And we must never forget that Krishna is the ultimate doer, and we are just but his servants. As soon as we become attached to all of these things, and we think that we are the doer, then Krishna will create a situation to remind you that he is the ultimate controller. Such is the favor of the Lord towards us. The difference between Krishna and the other demigods is that when we desire something from Krishna, Krishna may do one of three things. He may give it to you. He may create a situation to show you that this is not actually what is best for you. Or what you desire, he may end up taking it away from you so that you become more sincere in your prayer to him, and in that way he fixes his mind. You are able to fix your mind on him. Right? So Krishna doesn't always give us what we want, right? You know, we look around devotees and we may say, why is this devotee living in such a terrible situation? It is from past karma. Yes, it may be there. But Krishna is ultimately showing favor to these devotees. When we become comfortable, when we have everything, it's so easy to be able to float on this cloud of illusion that this life is comfortable, right? If you have all your material comforts, if you have good health, you have wealth, you're able to travel, you're able to do everything that you want, will you actually remember Krishna? Or you'll become so caught up, which is what is happening, we become so caught up thinking that this material world is a comfortable place and it's where we should remain. So this is why Krishna takes away something from us, right? You're not going to have somebody who's going to have the opulences of the Lord and is going to be able to have each one of them. There's going to be something that Krishna is going to take away from you to remind you that you are not invincible and this material world is a place full of suffering and we need to go back home, back to Him. So this is just, like general population. But what special mercy does the Lord bestow upon His unalloyed devotees? And Srila Prabhupada explains this in Srimad Bhagavatam 6:11-23. He says, people generally aspire for religiosity, economic development, and sense gratification. But a devotee has no other desire than to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead, both in this life and in the next. The special mercy for the unalloyed devotee is that the Lord saves him from hard labor to achieve the results of religion, economic development, and sense gratification. Of course, if one wants such benefits, the Lord certainly awards them. However, Shukadev Goswami speaks to Maharaj Parikshit, and he says that for self-realization, the austerities and penances performed by the queens of Dwarka have no comparison. The objective of self-realization is one, Krishna. Therefore, although the dealings of the queens with Krishna appear just like ordinary dealings between husband and wife, the principal point to be observed is the queen's attachment for Krishna. The entire process of austerity and penance is meant to detach one from the material world and enhance one's attachment to Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Okay? So, as devotees, we shouldn't desire liberation. Right? A pure devotee of the Lord, their only desire is to serve Krishna. Your only desire is to be able to make sure that Krishna is happy. Not thinking about, okay, I want liberation for my own selfish needs. I do not want to take birth again. All the devotee is thinking of is, I want to be able to serve Krishna. And for a devotee, they are happy to serve Krishna in any environment. Right? In any environment, they are happy to serve the Lord. Okay? If we look at Prahlad Maharaj, even when he was thrown into the pit with all these snakes that were around, all he was thinking about was not his imminent death. All he was thinking about was praying and glorifying the Lord. And, Srila Prabhupada, this was one of the reasons that convinced me, or that stopped me from, I'll share with you, that stopped me from eating meat as a child. I wasn't, when I was younger, even though I was born in a devotee family, my dad was not a devotee. And when I was very young, then, I did have meat for a short while. But the one thing that really made me think about it, Srila Prabhupada, when he was young, he got, I think it was yellow fever, but he was suffering from jaundice, right? Some sort of illness. And the doctor had told him the only way you're going to be able to cure Abhay Charan is if you give him chicken soup. And Srila Prabhupada refused to take that. And it was to get him better, but he refused, right? Because he knows this is against what he should be taking, right? He will not touch it. He would rather die than be able to take this chicken soup to make him better. And for a devotee, it's the same. A devotee, all they want to do is just to be able to serve the Lord. They don't want to be able to, nothing matters to them apart from being able to please Krishna, right? For a devotee, from the time they wake up till the time they go to bed, they're thinking about how they'll be able to serve Krishna. And who's the closest person that'll be able to, or closest relationship that tells you how to serve somebody unconditionally? A mother, right? When a mom wakes up, the first thing they're thinking about is their children. What am I going to cook for the child? What am I going to do when they go to school? Then they come home, there's homework. Then I have to prepare supper. And this is the true love that a mother has for the child. And therefore, in the same way, when one looks at the relationship with the Lord, if one has that motherly form of relationship with the Lord, it's very easy to love the Lord by adopting these relationships. Okay. Are there any questions? It's already 8:30. We didn't get very far. Any questions, comments, corrections, Rukmini?
Hare Krishna. It's really lovely to hear you speak. I'm thinking about the point that you made about King Chitraketu and how he has this fleeting thought and then he's plunged into like a demon species too. And I'm wondering if Krishna used that yardstick on me, for every fleeting thought. So it seems like there's a leeway with what people can get away with. And sometimes it seems like you didn't do anything and then you get it, like you get the full brunt of the... so I was wondering, how do we see this? Krishna's, it seems random.
The thing is, as I said, to be able to understand Krishna, it's very difficult, right? In one sense, Krishna is very heavy with one individual. In the other sense, he's very lenient, right? I mean, if we look at Mother Yashoda, when she was boiling the milk and the milk boiled over, right? Milk, you're not supposed to waste milk, right? If you even spill a drop of milk, whatever austerities that you perform for the day is wasted. That's how valuable milk is, right? And here Mother Yashoda is boiling the milk and then the milk is boiling over. But yet Krishna still has this relationship where he has this love for Mother Yashoda and she has this love for him. So Krishna is inconceivable, right? His potency is just inconceivable. And even though Krishna is inconceivable, that does not mean that whatever fall downs that we may have, that Krishna will completely overlook it. I mean, we know that an offense to a Vaishnava is the greatest offense. And Krishna will never forgive you unless you beg forgiveness from the devotee. Right? There's many offenses that Krishna can forgive, but that of an offense to his devotee. So, in the same way, where Chitraketu, that example of Chitraketu was there as a pastime to be able to teach us to learn from this, to not allow ourselves to become pride and puffed up, because if we do, then that's going to result in a fall down. Many of these associates that came down when Krishna was there, actually all of them, were all associates of the Lord that came down from the spiritual world to enact these pastimes so that we can learn from them. So, yes, while it does seem that we have the leeway, at the same time, there's this, Krishna is merciful to his devotee and he is forgiving. And the way in which we get that mercy and forgiving nature from the Lord is through the mercy of the spiritual master. Because whatever service that we have or that we render, we're actually not rendering it to ourselves. We're praying before we worship the Lord, the deity. we first worship the spiritual master, and we ask the spiritual master to please perform the service to the Lord, or assist us to perform the service to the Lord on your behalf. That's our prayer when we engage in deity worship, right? And similarly, in any devotional service that we may embark on, we should pray for the mercy of the spiritual master, because by the mercy of the spiritual master, our offenses in that service becomes forgiven. And, you know, this human form of life, I always say that if we were pure devotees, we would not still be in this material world. We'll be gone back home, back to Godhead. We all still have these anatas within us. People think that, okay, because we are in ISKCON, or because we are a devotee, that you are free from anatas, right? A devotee should be self-controlled. They should not get angry. You know, they should be completely compassionate and merciful and all of this. But yet we still have these anatas, and Krishna knows that. You know, we are so fortunate that we have been able to take this human form of life, because we know there's 8,400,000 species, and this human form is one of the ways that gives you the best chance to be able to go back home, back to Godhead. That's the human form, right? Where you can use your intelligence. Then what to speak of becoming a devotee? To be a devotee is so rare. And to be able to have the association of the devotees is even rarer. You know, Prabhupada said in various places that the association by sadhu sangha, in different places he says 90%, 95%, then 99%. Sadhu sangha is the best way in which one can make make spiritual advancement, and is the only way in which we can advance and serve the Lord. Only by the association of the devotees do we get devotional service. Right? If you go to the kitchen, the devotee kitchen with Mother Sukumari, she will engage you in service. Right? If you come to the temple and you want to sing, then the devotees will engage you in singing. I'm going off topic, Mother Rukmini, but does this sort of answer your question? But what I'm trying to say is that Krishna is merciful and he's kind to the devotees, but to an extent. There's a point in which Krishna is going to crack the whip, and he's going to tell you that right now, you need to make amends and you need to ask for repentance. And that is when we commit Vaishnava Aparad. And Vaishnava Aparad is so serious that, you know, sometimes you may do something. There's different levels of offense, right? It starts when you think it in your mind, then you vocalize it, and then you act on it. And there's different levels of reaction that we get for that. The offenses within the mind is lesser compared to when you act on it. But if one has to think about the Vaishnava Aparad, like sometimes, you know, it's this fleeting thought, and many of the times, if we break down why we commit Vaishnava Aparad, it's all due to envy, right? There's envy within the heart. And from envy within the heart rises all these other things. Comes the anger, comes the critical nature that we have. You know, like, I can do better than this devotee. I can sing better, I can preach better. I'm a better madanga player, whatever it is. It all comes from envy within the heart. And if we are able to control that, it's our envious nature that brought us to this material world. And it's this envious nature that will keep us bound here. And that is the difference between the gopis and the queens in Vrindavan and us. They're not envious of Krishna. There's no ounce of envy within their hearts. All they have is compassion and true love for the Lord. And what do we have for the Lord? How many of us can say that we genuinely love Krishna? I mean, there's that sentiment. We have varying sentiments within the day we love Krishna. But love is not a sentiment. It's an action. Right? It's a doing word. It is a verb. When you love someone, you serve them. And when you love Krishna, you want to serve Him in different ways. It's not just I love you, you love me, whatever. It's not this airy fairy thing. And this is why Srila Prabhupada, when he left, your love for me will be shown in how you cooperate with each other. And by cooperation, this movement will flourish. Okay. Any other questions, comments, additions? Okay, thank you, devotees. Hare Krishna.